to think about putting a dollar value on developing another person's human potential. And the reality is, when it comes to our buyers, they need tangible evidence that investing in us is a good decision for them. So we're actually helping our clients when we show things like financial payoff of our work. So there's several reasons, and I'll walk through those. But first, I want to share with you how I got into this work, because if somebody had told me 15 or 20 years ago that this is what I would be doing today, I never would have believed them. So what happened for me is, way back in 2005, I worked for an organization. This is a group of a leadership program that I was running at this organization. I joined this organization in 2005, and at that time, all of our senior executives had an executive coach. We had 22 senior executives all around the world. And right after I joined, right after 2005, 2006, what happened in our industry, the media industry, is it started to go through huge upheaval. All of the things that were happening in social media were impacting our business, which was a traditional media company. So the way that started to materialize is it started to impact our P&L and our financials. And so now you know what I'm going to say next, which is to say that we had to make some serious decisions about budget. And one of the things that was cut was coaching. And that was a surprise to me. I thought more than any other time, our senior executives would need their executive coach to help them with these huge challenges that they're all facing. And when I shared that with my manager, the head of HR, and I said, I thought they all loved their coaches. I thought they loved the coaching conversations. I thought they got value out of it. Why did they cut coaching? And he said, it's true, they love their coaches, they love the conversations, they feel like they're getting value out of it, but we cannot see how it's financially paying off with the organization. And because of that, we're taking it out of the organization. Well, I was able to bring coaching back to that organization within about a year. And the way that I did it is I ran a coaching program in that organization. I tracked all of the changes that were impacted as a result of that program, and I also measured the financial return on investment. I shared that study with the CFO about a year after that period of time, when I shared with her all of that data. We had 251% return on investment because of the retention that we saw as a result of that program. When I shared that with the CFO, she said, I think that the ROI is probably even higher than what you're representing. She gave me a budget to bring a leadership program and a management development program to that organization. I always attribute my ability to have tangible data and evidence, whether financial or non-financial, as the way that I retain my job in that organization over 6 years of huge disruption. Eventually, the business owner sold the business. The business owner was Bill Gates. You see his picture here. That's him standing in the middle. And because I had the data and the evidence, I was able to retain my job, my budget, and my team over those very disrupted period of years, of 6 years. So I always like to share that story because it illustrates the value of having tangible evidence, even if it's not financial, having tangible evidence that demonstrates the value of your work, so that when economic times do get more difficult, it's easier for your decision makers to decide to retain working with you or investing in working with you. So let me go forward and talk about some of the 3 key reasons why I think this is still so important today. The first reason is represented here on this slide. And what this statement is saying, it comes from Inc. magazine. And what it's saying, and I know that I'm speaking with ICF coaches, but what you will notice is there are really no legal requirements to being a coach. Anybody can say, I'm a coach. They don't have to get certified. Now, it's nice if they get certified. Of course, we're all ICF. Associated with ICF, so we see that as a big value. But the reality is, because there's no legal requirement, anybody can say, I'm a coach. And so the downside of that is it makes it difficult for our prospective clients to decide who they should invest in. So they need tangible reasons, understand why they should invest in a coach. And when you have tangible data, when you have financial ROI, you make it easier for your prospective client to invest in you. So you make it easier to win new budget. So that's the first reason why I think having tangible evidence is so important, including financial ROI. The second reason why I think it's so important comes down to this quote, which is, my budget might get cut. Now, a lot of people have had something like that happen now. You know, it's maybe not been cut, maybe it's been put on pause, and they're concerned that pause is going to turn into canceled. But this is really the second reason why I think it's so important, is that the budget might get cut. For a long time, through economic prosperity, people didn't really think that might happen. Here's a quote from somebody that I have worked with, who even in very prosperous economic times, shared with me that her position as an internal coach was cut. It was a very large organization, very large scale coaching program, leadership coaching program. They made the decision, even during very prosperous times, to cut this leadership program. And the reason she said that they did is because they didn't have anything tangible, any financial reasons to continue to invest in the program. So as you're looking at this quote, if you're thinking, well, maybe it wasn't a very innovative company, maybe they're not very sophisticated. This company at the time was a $96 billion company. It's even bigger today. And they had at that time 156,000 employees. They have more today. So even during economic times of prosperity, decision makers still need to see the value of their investment, especially in large scale programs. So that's really the second reason why I think measuring, including the financial value, is so important, is to keep or grow that budget or business that you have. And the last reason why I think it is so important is because clients have been asking for this for a long time. I've seen all kinds of research. This particular research comes from ICF all the way back in 2009. So now we're going back 11 years. And at that time, this research study from ICF was directed at people who make hiring decisions about coaching. And one of the questions on the survey is, what is the selection criteria that you use? At that time, the number one selection criteria was really this cluster of items up here at the top: coach's confidence, personal rapport, personal compatibility. I think of that as coach chemistry. That was the number one selection criteria during that time. The number two selection criteria, all the way down here, effectiveness of a coaching process. So even back in 2009, that was an important selection criteria. The challenge way back in 2009 is that we didn't have very many practical ways and easy ways to measure the effectiveness of coaching programs. Certainly what I'm going to share with you today is one way that you can get started demonstrating the effectiveness of your coaching. So the second reason why the third reason why it's so important to measure the financial impact of your coaching is, first of all, clients have been asking for it for a long time. But when you're able to do that, because so few people actually are, you will stand out as the obvious choice and you'll be known as the go-to coach. So there are three main reasons why I think measuring, even if it's not the financial data, even if it's just non-financial data, why measurement is so important today. So now what I'd love to do is to hear from you. Type in chat, of these three, 1, 2, or 3, which ones are most important to you? And Lynn, when we start seeing them, you can start to summarize.
3. Wow, everybody wants to be known as the go-to coach. So we will have 173 go-to coaches.
Right.
1 and 3, so win budget. Okay.
3, somebody.
Everything.
All right. We got it loud and clear. You know what's interesting about this? I've been talking about this topic for a long time. Since 2009, I've been talking about this topic. Way back in 2009, the reason why people wanted the ROI data is they wanted to win new business. Then for a long time, they wanted to expand their business within client accounts. And what's so fascinating about what you're saying today is you want to be known as the go-to coach. And what I think this speaks to, this is my hunch about this, there's a coach on every corner. I live in Seattle, Washington. We always joke there's a coach on every corner. If you go into Starbucks, there's probably 5 coaches. Well, not today, but when Starbucks is open again and you go into Starbucks, there's probably 5 people in there that are coaches. So there's a coach everywhere. There's really no barrier. ICF has done a wonderful job around certification as a way to establish credibility, help you stand out. And when you have the data and evidence to show that you're the one who gets results, you're more likely to stand out as the obvious choice. So let's talk about this ROI, because surprisingly, I have found people have different ideas of what ROI is. ROI is a financial formula. I'm going to share the financial formula with you in a moment, but I want to share with you our process of how we arrive at ROI. So the process that we use in our automated system, MyExcelia, follows this process model. The first step is that we engage with the client. In other words, if we're going to capture data from the client, we have to be able to speak to the client about the benefit to them. If it's positioned too much about a benefit for us to capture the data and have the evidence, of course they're not going to be interested. So the benefit to the client, the coachee, is so that they can see how far they've come. That's the benefit for the coachee. So engaging with the client about the value of capturing the data. The second step is to make sure you have the right measures. So exactly for setup, making sure you have the right measures that will illustrate the change for that person. The third step is around centering around midpoint progress. So you're sharing at the midpoint, you should be sharing progress reports, showing how far they've come by the midpoint, where they may want to focus their efforts towards the end of the engagement. So I call that center around midpoint progress. The fourth step is around empowering. That's when the coaching engagement has ended. Now you have the financial ROI. You can share that back with the coachee. The coachee should feel proud of how far they've come and feel empowered to move their career forward. And then finally, the last step, and this is most relevant to the coaches or people who manage coaching programs, is to then repurpose that data, make it anonymous, get permission to repurpose it and make it anonymous, and use it to lift your expertise. That's when you're going to be speaking on the stage, speaking on webinars, using the data and evidence to talk about the unique value that you have to offer. So that's the overall model. Baked into this model is conducting the money talk and calculating the financial ROI. So now I want to talk about what the financial ROI is. So I always think there's non-financial ROI and then there's financial ROI. So non-financial ROI is how much people have improved on communication skills, or how much people have improved in influencing others, or how much people have shifted their mindset. So I think of that as non-financial ROI. We can convert those measures to financial measures. We do it through the money talk, and I'm going to share that with you a little bit later today. But I want to talk first of all about this ROI formula. So we all can understand the formula in the context of our money, our investments. So if you invest in the stock market, or you have a retirement account, or maybe you have some like a property investment, you know that if you invest X amount of dollars, if you sell that investment later, you hope to get a return. You hope to get the same amount of money plus more back. That's financial return on investment. The formula is very, very easy. In this case, imagine you invest $2,000 in a company, you sell that stock a year later for $2,200. The formula is you take the amount you sold it for minus the cost of the investment divided by the cost of the investment. In this case, it's 10% ROI. 10% ROI is pretty good. If you invested, especially today, if you invested money in a stock and you got 10% ROI within a year, you'd be happy with that. When it comes to coaching, our clients expect higher ROI. I just finished a study for a client this couple weeks ago, and she wasn't very happy with the study because it had 117% ROI, which I thought was fantastic. But she wants it to be even higher because she thinks her clients have higher expectations. So I have found that if in my practice, it varies anywhere from 42%, that's the lowest I've ever seen in my client work, and the highest I've ever seen is about 2,000% ROI. The average is somewhere around 100% ROI. So just know that if we saw 10%, we'd be really happy. For some reason, our clients expect it to be even higher. I think if it's around 100%, that's really solid. I think when it's really high, then it's hard to defend. So I don't like when it's a couple $1,000s ROI. I think that's really hard to explain. So that's the ROI formula. And now what I want to do is bring this to life in a case study. And this case study is a project that I did. I did the measurement for one of my clients. And let me tell you a little bit about the situation, and then I'll tell you about the actual program. So the situation was that my client, Mitch Shepard, owns a diversity and inclusion leadership program here in the Seattle area. She was brought in by one of her clients at a large technology company. I have permission to share the data. I don't have permission to share the name of the company. So she was brought into that company because the leader of a technology team wanted to attract more women to his team. So the issue or the situation was this organization is a very difficult place for women with families to work because people tend to work really long hours until 10 o'clock at night, midnight, I'm not kidding you, until 1 a.m. For a long time, this company was known as the worst place to work in Seattle because it's such a demanding culture. And the issue this was creating for many women, especially the women that had families, is they had to leave at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, go home and make dinner. And all the really good business decisions would be made after 5 or 6 o'clock at night. And so these women were missing out. Very competitive environment, hard for the women. They didn't stay at this organization. So the first reason is he just wanted to be a good guy and attract more women to his team, make a great place to work for women on his team. The other reason why he wanted more women on his team is because he works in technology. He knows the more diversity you have on your team, the greater innovation, the greater new ideas that you can bring to life. And so from a practical business reason, he wanted more women on his team because of that. So that's a little bit about the situation. And then, so what happened was he brought my client Mitch in to run this leadership program. A couple weeks into the program, he said, "Hey, Mitch, how do you know this program gets results?" And so because he challenged her with that, she brought me in to do the measurement. So let me tell you about the design of the program, how I captured the data, and then I'll share with you some of the results slides. So the design of the program is, it's a 6-month-long program. Mitch has curated all of this content that's very specific to women in leadership roles. All that content is hosted online in an online learning hub. The women are supposed to go through each one of those modules. So there's 6 modules, 1 module per month. They're supposed to self-pace through each one of those modules, watch recordings, do the worksheets. And then once a month, they would come together for a group coaching session with the coach. Also, some of the women had some one-on-one coaching. So that's the design of the study: online learning modules, group coaching, and some one-on-one coaching. The way that I collected data in this study follows the exact same model that I just shared with you. I collected some initial data. Well, I collected data through interviews and through online survey. I did 2 interviews, one at the start of their work, one at the end of their work. And then and basically those are the money talk conversations at the start and the end. And then I captured data at the midpoint through survey and at the end point through survey. So that's how I captured data in this study. So that's an overview of the situation, the design of the program, how I collected data, and the next set of slides that I'm going to share with you are some of the results. The full result slide deck is 61 slides. I'm just going to share a couple of slides with you. So the first slide here is the top 10 ways that women grew. One of my very favorite things to do when presenting data is to look at the top ways across all the measures that people grow or change. I find it's an easy way to communicate. So these are the top 10 ways that these women grew. The ones that have stars next to them are the ones where the data is most significant. So while 4 through 10 are the 4th through 10th way that they grew, it's really those top 3 ways that the ones are most significant. We also looked at the midpoint, we looked at how women grew on the things that they were learning about. This slide comes from the measures down here on the bottom. All of these topics down here on the bottom came from Mitch. They all align with her learning content from her modules. The scale that we used is a very simple scale at this time: noted clarity, some clarity, significant clarity. And what you'll notice here is that by the midpoint, 100% of these women had gained at least some clarity by self-report. really high. We don't normally see that this high at the midpoint, but this is what they shared at the midpoint. By the final, something's going on with my slides here. Okay, and then by the final, we also looked at the things that women were doing differently. So all the measures down here at the bottom, these also came from Mitch. These were all the things that Mitch wanted these women to start doing differently that aligned to the kinds of things that they were learning about. We used a similar scale, a 1, 2, 3 scale, no change, some change, significant change. Asked the women to self-rate again, and now this time, by the end, what we're seeing is only on 2 measures is there at least some change on all these behavior changes. So when I first saw this data, I actually worried because it's only 2 behaviors where there's at least some change on average. And I thought, uh-oh, I hope that we have some financial impact because only 2 changes is not very, very significant. So the 2 things that they changed, one, were taking leaps and amplifying the contributions of others. And it seems like something small, but it was actually very big in this case. Because what I also did after we captured the survey data is then I met with each woman in a one-on-one conversation and I had the money talk conversation. I'm going to share with you the money talk in a little bit. And each woman said to me something that sounded like this. You know, when I first, right before I joined this program, I would go to team meetings and I would have an idea. I'd say that idea out loud, and it was like I was invisible. Nobody would say anything. Or I would say an idea, and 5 minutes later, somebody else would say the same idea, and they would get all the credit for it. And what I learned from this program, this is what the women would say to me. They would say, what I've learned from this program is that it happens to everybody and it happens to women more often. And because they recognized that it was a common experience, especially for all of these women, they persisted longer. They took greater leaps. They were more courageous. They stepped into things that were more difficult. They persisted longer in negotiating with their mostly male colleagues. That was the first thing, taking leaps. And this one woman renegotiated a vendor contract, saved the company $17.6 million. They renegotiated headcounts. I'm going to share some of the financial impacts. The second thing they started doing is now when they went to those team meetings, when one woman would say something, instead of somebody else taking her idea, all the other women would point to her and say, yes, what she said. So they were amplifying the contributions of each other. Sounds like 2 small things. It was actually very significant and huge. So now I'm going to share with you the monetary values, and then I'll see what questions you have. So in the money talk conversation at the end, I asked each woman to share with me what she gained from the program and how that made a difference for her personally or for her team, and we looked for the monetary impacts. Here are 2 examples. So this is slide 5 of 6. I'm going to show you slide 5 and 6. So there's 4 other slides that have monetary values on them. One woman, this woman right here, what she was able to do is she actually influenced her team to change their production process. And by changing their production process, it allowed them to require less headcount. They had on their budget a planned headcount, a contractor of $210,000. It turned out they didn't need to bring that person on because they had changed their productivity processes. They didn't need that other headcount. She attributed 20% of that improvement to the courage that she gained in negotiating and influencing her team to adopt these new productivity measures. So we assigned $42,000 to that one. So there's one example. In another example, this woman, we weren't able to make the connection. We ended up with the 0 value for the monetary impact. The reason I'm sharing that with you is to illustrate in a large program where the content is the same for every single person, it's not customized or individualized, it's not uncommon that some people will not see any financial impact and some people will. So that's not uncommon. So, but what we do with all of them, we capture all the measures, we total them up, we add them all up, and now what you're seeing is the total amount of savings or gains as a result of what these women gained from this program, $2.3 million. You can see the cost of the program listed there as well, and then we just use the ROI formula. So 2,271% ROI. Really high ROI. When I first saw it, this was the highest ROI that I had ever seen when I saw this number. I didn't think it was right. The very first thing I did is I checked my math. Did I do the math right? The second thing I did is I thought, did I capture all the values right? And I went back through all of my notes to make sure I understood everything accurately. And then I realized this is right. So I called Mitch, my client, and I said, this is what it is. The financial ROI is 2,271%. We've talked through it, and the way she presented the data back to her client is she went through every single monetary measure, line item by line item, gave him the opportunity to debate and challenge every single number. He accepted every single one. He didn't have any questions. So by the time she got to the end and showed this to him, he said, yep, that makes sense. And she said, well, would you agree that this is amount? He said, absolutely, I'll buy it. In fact, he reinvested in the program in the following calendar year. He grew the budget because part of the data we also had showed that they needed more one-on-one coaching. So he grew the budget, and he invited 15 other sponsors within that organization to come and hear about the success of this program so that Mitch could expand her work in that organization. So lots of great value from this. She asked him, can I use this number? Can I use this number within your organization? He said, absolutely. So there's that case study. And now I'm going to pause talking and see what questions you have.
Hey, so first question is, how do you determine and derive the indicators to measure?
In this case, Mitch decided. So in this situation, it was a little unusual. Normally I get involved before the program starts. In this case, she brought me in after the program had started. She had done measurement before on her own, but she needed to elevate the rigor in her measurement. So that's why she brought me in. And so those measures around clarity and behavior change, those are ones she had already established. I just changed the scale and how we asked about them and that type of thing.
Okay. The next question. Coaching outcomes are highly dependent on coachability or motivation to be coached of the staff picked by the corporate clients. Do you insist on some form of selection of coaches that go into any ROI study?
That's a good question. Well, so here in the US, and so this might be a cultural difference. In the US, most coaches will not work with people who don't want to be coached. So that speaks to this idea of coachability. The thing that we do in our automated system is that we position the midpoint progress report as a way for a coachee to see how far they've come by the midpoint, both self-report as well as manager rating, so that they get some feedback, and we also build in some accountability that way. So by doing it in that way, we're building in accountability both for the coach as well as the coachee by letting them know we're going to check on the midpoint and we're going to check at the end. So if the ratings are relatively low at the midpoint, that opens up a really good conversation for how they want to focus going forward.
Thank you, Lisa. There's a request to show the previous slide. Could you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. No. There we go.
Thank you. All right, next question. How do you determine, in this example, you had a chance to meet people and interview and survey. How do you estimate ROI when you're doing a proposal and trying to win the business?
Yeah, in that case, I wouldn't put any estimated ROI on it because so many things could happen. Imagine if you put an estimated ROI value in the proposal and then COVID happened after you started. Whole different result, right? So, but the way to bring it into the work is to say that you will include measurement. In fact, this morning we had I hosted a webinar with my group of coaches. And it was called the ROI of Proving Your ROI. I had one of my clients I've worked with for 4 years. And she talks a lot about baking this process into your method. It's not an extra, it's how you work. This is how our process works. We capture data at the midpoint to illustrate the changes that have occurred so far, to build in accountability, and we capture data at the end. So we capture financial ROI at the end as well, and include your process around it in the proposal, but don't promise any real financial outputs because we could have a pandemic.
Very true. Next one. Do we have time for more, Lisa?
Yeah, let's
okay.
go. Yeah.
What is the time interval you feel is most effective in measuring the effects / impact? What about the positive skew? So there are two questions in this, okay? What about the positive skew that participants would want to indicate in terms of a positive change after undergoing coaching? It seems to be self-fulfilling at times, as expressed by some skeptics to measuring ROI.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a couple of questions. One is the time interval. The time interval, I think the time interval matters less than the commitment of the coachee and the motivation of the coachee, and how much they're applying something. I think it also matters, are they working on something that's a very deep habit that they've had their entire life, and trying to break that habit is probably going to take more time. There is some research that shows that when you have 5 or more coaching sessions, you get more to the transformational kinds of behaviors. In other words, if you have one session, you can help somebody with, I think there's self-identity now, I can't even remember what they are, but there is some research available that shows what you can anticipate on average, given whether it's 1 session, 2 sessions, 3 sessions, or 5. But the main recommendation from the research study is that at least 5 sessions, you're going to make more substantial kinds of movements. So that's the answer to the first one. Then there was something about ratings here. So on the ratings, we ask the self to rate. So we ask the coachee to self-rate, and we ask the manager to rate at the midpoint, at least the manager. In long engagements, imagine you have a year-long engagement. So some people who are coaching very senior people, sometimes those contracts are year-long contracts. In that case, you would have the midpoint, 6 months in, and then the final at the year. And so in that case, you could open it up to all of the observers. So the way our system works is they can have 20 observers. Not that everybody should have 20, but if you have 20 legitimate observers, you can have up to 20 observers. So then that adds a little more objectivity to the measures. What we have found, so we just did a data analysis of all of the data out of our system. And what we found is, in general, observers are essentially agreeing with the participant self-rating. In general, that's what we're finding. So not a huge difference in some of those ratings.
Next question. Do you then partner with the coach and the organization, or just the coach?
Me personally, or you as a coach, who would you partner with on this? If it's you, let me talk about that. So for you in your work, you're going to partner with both. And the messaging is different. So looking back to that diagram that I showed you, the Excel diagram, the first step is engage. So let me go back to this. So when we developed this model, I'm going to go back to this. Whoops. These are all the very important steps with the ROI data. And this first one is around engage, and it's easy for people to overlook the importance of this one. They might skip past this one and go straight to the measures. What are we measuring? Engage is critical because you need people to be giving genuine ratings. They need to really be committed to the process. And the messaging is different for the coachee, the sponsor, and really for you. So the value to you as a coach is different than the value to the sponsor and the value to the coachee. The value to the coachee is that they get feedback, measurable feedback, tangible feedback about how much they're growing. And they have it documented. So think about a coachee who wants to have a performance conversation, or a coachee who wants to advocate for himself in a career conversation or for a promotion. Now they've got some tangible evidence that empowers them to talk about their growth and their development. So it empowers them with that data. That's different than the sponsor who wants to hold that coachee accountable to actually implementing what they're learning from coaching. So the sponsor has a different goal. They want to hold that coachee accountable, and they want to be able to show the evidence that their coaching programs are impactful. They want a seat at the table. They want to elevate their perception. They want to be seen as a strategic partner. In today's world, every functional area has data. Technology, marketing, operations, finance, they all work with data. So HR, people who are running these coaching programs, if they want a seat at the table, if they want to be seen as a strategic partner, they need data beyond 10 people went through the program or 100 people weren't. That's not enough data. So if they want to be taken seriously, they've got to have more substantial data. So that's the messaging to them. And then, of course, the messaging for you is different. You want your clients to be successful, and you also want the data in the end because you want to be able to ask for permission to repurpose it, make it anonymous, and be able to speak about the value of your work with confidence and authority and have some tangible evidence around it. So all three groups have different needs and different benefits from all of this work, and this engaging step is a key piece to make it all successful.
Okay, thank you. Shall we keep rolling with questions?
We'll keep rolling. We'll keep rolling. Wait, we keep rolling with questions or keep rolling with slides?
Up to you. Okay, I think this is quite key. It helps to clarify. Okay. There seems to be a shift to ROE from ROI in the coaching literature. What are your views of using return on expectations versus return on investment?
Good question. Well, it depends on who the buyer is. I think it really depends on who the buyer is. ROE can have different meanings to different people, so you'll have to clarify what that means to people. Return on expectations, for some, it might work, it might be beneficial. And I feel that ROI is more powerful and more impactful. I think that this is my personal view, obviously, because I do this work, so I'm going to have a different view on this than other people. But if you look at every functional area within an organization, and I mentioned this earlier, finance, operations, marketing, the ability to capture data and use that data to make key decisions about business is becoming more and more sophisticated. So if you want to stay in the game in terms of sophistication with data, I think having the ROI data is key to being seen at that level. I think the ROE data is, my expectation was it was a good experience, so my experience was met. I think that if you want to up your game, the ROI is the way.
So how would you marry both in the way that you deliver the process and the eventual reporting? Yeah. Because we also don't want to say ROI is more important. We don't want to say either is more important because we have to measure. Both come out. How do we measure them?
You can still capture things like outcomes. So one of my goals was I'm not going to be able to think of, it's the end of my day. One of my goals was to have a better relationship with my manager. And I achieved that. You don't have to put a monetary value on it. It can still be part of the story. It's still part of the outcomes. And then there may be a financial measure in there as well, but you can have both. You can capture both the outcomes that you don't put a financial value around, as well as those that you can.
Okay. Do you want more questions or do you want to move on?
Sure.
More questions?
Sure. Let's take another, and I'll go to the money talk.
Okay. All right. So what you're sharing, somebody's saying, what you're sharing seems to be referring to projects where a large company wants to launch a coaching program to a large group of employees. I haven't seen many such projects in our territory. The more common ones I see are the requests for an individual to get a coach for some reason. Yep. What is the rest of, what do you think around this in terms of, the exact thing is, what is the rest of the group's experience, as I think this may impact the ease of getting clients to put the time and effort into measurement? Yeah. What do you think?
What do I think?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so this was the question for me for a long time, because I used to well, I still do, in my consulting practice, I would do all these unique projects, all these custom projects like this one for Mitch and many others. And so a couple of years ago, we started developing an automated system so that coaches who have one coaching engagement and they want to capture data, and Lynn, you have experienced the Excel sheets, using all the Excel sheets. So we've automated a system now. And so it reduces the amount of time for coaches. Otherwise, you have the Excel sheets, you can do the Excel sheets, use a survey, capture the data, have interviews, have interview questions, and ask for ratings in interviews. You can do that by hand as well. And it will take somebody, 5, 10, however much time you want to put into it, you can probably put into it. But we have in our business, we automated the system. We made that change here within the last year.
Right.
Does that help?
Well, we'll see what happens in chat. So guys, keep your questions coming, and we can. Will there be some more Q&A later on, Lisa?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay. All right.
Yes. All right. So we head into the money talk.
Let's do it.
I don't think there's been any questions on how do you do the monetary value. So that's interesting to me, because normally we have a lot. So it always looks like it makes sense when I'm giving the case study and sharing the examples, and people say, yeah, that all makes sense. But then they think about it and they think, but my clients come for coaching because they want greater self-awareness, or they want innovation, or they want to sleep better, or they want to handle stress, or they want to communicate better, or they want to be more engaging or more influential. So how do you put a dollar value on that? And the way that we do it is through the money talk. And the money talk is a conversational framework that I created to help you find the financial values. And there's 5 steps to it. These are the steps. And what you'll notice about the money talk is it's very, very similar to a coaching conversation. And the conversation is like the coaching conversation, or the coaching contracting conversation. It's different in 2 ways. The first is that you go much, much deeper in the conversation. And the second is, the reason you go much deeper is because you're going to put a financial value on it. And so the way it works is you understand where the person was at the start, where they were at the end of coaching. You unpack both of those situations to look at the ripple effect of that. In other words, how was that current situation affecting things, the future, the end state, and then that's where you find the financial value. So I'm going to bring this to life through a question. I see a couple questions over here that I want to address, because I'm looking at the chat and I just want to address them before we go any further. So some people are saying, had a similar case where one of my clients, and they found the link to coaching and revenue a far stretch. So in our process, what we do after we get the financial values and we capture the financial values from the coachee, then we have a validation process. So once you have those financial values, then you go to somebody within the organization, whether it's a CFO or it's a manager, or sometimes it's HR. Usually I'm meeting with HR. When I'm doing this for clients, I'm almost always meeting with HR, getting those financial values validated by somebody else in the organization. That's the way I handle it to address this issue of it not being believable. I saw a couple of comments in here around this topic. So get the numbers validated. When you're dealing with numbers like revenue numbers, you're not going to assign the entire revenue amount to the change in coaching, because what if that revenue is a loss leader for that company? So maybe they sold more, but they didn't make a dime off of that because it's a loss leader for them. So you really want to get somebody within the organization to validate the numbers that you captured from the coachee if you want to be able to use those financial values. All right, so I'm right there with you on that. You really want to check. You want to make sure that the numbers are acceptable before you put them down and say these are the actual numbers. So I'm going to show you 3 examples. All 3 of these examples come from the same organization. It was a leadership coaching program. And it was part some training and then some coaching. And in all three of these, actually in all of them, there were 20 participants in the whole program. I got all the financial values validated by the CFO. I'll tell you a little bit about that when we go through it. But so this first person, the current state, so how he was at the very start of coaching or at the start of this program before, right as it was beginning, is that he was stressed out, he was overworked, he knew that he was micromanaging his team. And the reason he was micromanaging his team, he knew he was doing it. The reason he was doing it is because he was a virtual manager and he was managing a team who was also virtual. So they didn't have a clear line of sight to understand what they were actually working on. And so he was actually duplicating the efforts of his team. He was doing his team's work, duplicating it. So he didn't have work-life balance. At the start, he was spending 15 to 20 hours a week duplicating the efforts of his team. We could put a financial value on that time that he was spending. By the end of the program, what happened for him is he was able to look at how he managed his team in a different way, set up structures and a framework to better manage them because he couldn't see them. And he also started to trust his team more. That was the other thing he realized what was going on is he didn't trust his team. And so by the end of the program, he was still duplicating the efforts of his team by 5 to 10 hours a week, but he was spending less time duplicating the efforts of his team. And so we looked at the amount that he saved and we put a financial value on that. So this is the initial discussion that came from, this is just the bullet points of the initial discussion that came from the coachee. I took these financial values, I met with the CFO after I'd collected all of the data. In this case, actually sat with the CFO at her desk next to her computer, and she looked on the screen and she checked a lot of this information and she validated it. She actually had questioned on 3 people in this program, asked me to go back and ask more questions. I went back and I asked those questions. I came back and I answered her, and she then validated those financial measures. So there's the first one. The second one is this person, the same program. In her situation at the start of this program, she didn't have any burning issues or problems or challenges. She also didn't have anything that she really aspired to, but she was a part of this program. She had been asked to participate in this program. And she, when I asked her, what are you hoping to gain from this program? She said, I'm not really sure, but I'm very attracted to the concept of innovation. I know we're going to be talking about innovation in this program, so something about innovation is what I want. In terms of thinking about what would the future, what would be the impact of greater innovation for her, she didn't know. She was unclear. So we weren't able to kind of narrow the focus and put a monetary value at the start of the engagement. But by the end of the engagement, when I went back and I did the Money Talk debrief with her, I said, at the start, you said you wanted to gain something about innovation. What have you gained from that? And she told me a little bit about it. So her situation, let me tell you about her role. Her situation was that she was an account manager in a professional services firm. Her job was to manage a very large account and then also manage the delivery services team, the people who were making the stuff. It was digital marketing, people who were making the stuff for the client. She was supposed to manage them, maintain the relationship of the account, and then also find new opportunities to develop business within that account. What happened for her is because she had focused on this innovation, she took away some of the concepts around allowing her team to take risks, allowing them to fail, step out of bounds. And what happened was her team found 3 new projects within that client account that totaled $822,000 of additional revenue. Now, we did not assign that full amount because this is when I met with the CFO, when I had these numbers, and the CFO made a decision as to the amount of that revenue that should be assigned based on how profitable those projects were. So that was the second one. I have one more that represents kind of the number one secret. So you can almost always find financial values in the time savings. So this one comes, same organization, almost similar to the first example where she was stressed out, too much work, But her issue was different. Her issue was not that she was duplicating the efforts of her team, but she wasn't holding her team accountable for performance. She was very nice. She didn't want to hurt people's feelings. And so because she was like that, she wasn't holding the bar high enough. And then when people didn't perform, even at the level that she wasn't holding them accountable. And so what she gained from this, and because of all of that, she was not duplicating the efforts of her team, but she was doing her team's work. She was spending 10 hours a week doing her team's work. We could put a monetary value on that. What happened for her is through this program, she learned some communication techniques that allowed her to say things that were hard for her before to say. So she had greater confidence in her communication because now she had some go-to communication techniques that she could use and feel good about, confident about. She built up some courage to make some changes on her team. And as a result of that, by the end of this program, she was only spending 2 hours a week doing the efforts of her team. So here is the third example. You can almost always find time savings. And now I'm going to pause because I imagine you have a whole bunch of questions.
There are a lot of questions. And I think we need to start off first with a clarification question. Are you talking about this concept from the perspective of it being something an individual coach should be doing for each client or each assignment, or from the perspective of this being a paid service to companies to help them determine the ROI from a coaching program covering a significant number of employees?
It could be either one. It could be that the company wants to see the value. That's most of my consulting work is that scenario. But the coach can bake this into their existing process and use it as a way to build in accountability.
So maybe can I chip in here a little bit? And maybe Lisa, could you help illustrate maybe more in detail the how do you go about a program, like from the start, the phases, just broadly, because I think there's some confusion around to what degree do you work with the sponsors, to what degree do you work with the larger team, and then to what degree do you work with the individual, and how all that comes into a final report.
Yeah. So with the sponsor, when it comes to this process, if you have this baked into your executive coaching, let's say you do this for every single coaching engagement, it's just, this is how it works. Then when you're talking with your sponsor, you're talking about, this is how my process works. I have this built-in accountability piece where we track behavioral progress at the midpoint. We also capture progress by the end. We also capture financial ROI at the end. And so you're baking that in, and then your talking points to the sponsor is the value of us doing that is that it builds in accountability for the coachee, and it also gives you something tangible that you can disguise, you can make it anonymous, and now you have something that you can use with the senior executives. So positioning it in that way, but it's not so much that you're getting information or input from the sponsor. It's more about, this is how the process works, and this is why we do it this way. With the coachee, it's the same. This is how the process works. This is why we do it this way. And here's what you get out of it. You'll have a document that shows all of your efforts throughout coaching and how far you've come by the end. So the benefit is different.
Okay. Next question. We've been talking about the ROI for the clients to justify the numbers. Then what about ROI for ourselves as coaches? Instead of negotiation based on the budget that clients provide, how can we come up with a reasonable budget/proposal for ourselves in the coaching engagement?
That's a good question. So we just finished, this is kind of a sidetrack answer to this, but it's an example. So we just finished, we're finishing a study. Emma knows about this because Emma participated in it. We're finishing up a study where we collected data from coachees and their observers, and we collected the financial ROI. And one of the things, and we also captured what the coaches are charging. And one of the things that we're learning is that in some cases, not in all cases, some coaches are undervaluing their services. we've had coaches who have used this measurement as a way to increase their fees to demonstrate this is why the client should pay more. I had one client in 2019. I had a client who, in her contract, I didn't tell her to do this. She did this on her own. I'm not sure that I would advise this, but she did it on her own. She built in her contract a bonus clause. And if the client saw financial ROI at the end, then the company would pay her a bonus of $2,000. And she ended up getting that bonus. And we went through the same process that I've just walked through with you. And, getting the numbers validated by HR. The HR person validated the financial measures. So it's not like the coach was presenting one thing and nobody in the company agreed to it. They actually agreed to the measures, and then they paid her the bonus.
That's interesting. Okay, if this were then built into an individual contract, what percentage of the total coaching contract time and budget should be allocated to doing the ROI assessment?
Good question. If you're doing it on your own and using Excel documents or survey forms and that type of thing, I would imagine it's at least 5 hours of time, maybe up to 20 hours of your time, unless you have a really smooth process. In our system, it's about an hour of time. Emma could probably speak to that maybe a little bit more, but it's, maybe the first time it's an hour of time, but it's significantly less time.
Okay. I even asked for a clarification on the last two factors on this slide. So the check phase is the validation of the dollar value from the money phase. How does this work out?
Say that again.
So the last two around money, 10 hours per week, 29,000,
Yep.
and then check. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So when I asked her about that question, I asked her how long, based on how many weeks had she been doing that already, and how much longer did she think she might be working at that pace if things didn't change. And so she gave me a time frame for that, and then we were able to put a monetary value on her hours within that time frame. Same thing on the 2 hours. I asked her how long did she anticipate that she would be able to sustain that change, and then we put a dollar value on that on the time savings.
Okay, thank you. That's clear.
The difference, yeah. So it's the difference between the two that we're referencing.
All right. Do we have time for one more?
Yes.
Okay, I think we need to kind of circle back to a discussion from earlier, because there's still a lack of clarity around the attribution of other causes to the final outcome of the report. So there's some talk around, okay, how exactly do you still arrive at the validation? For example, if you ask the CFO, for example, how would they know if they were not involved?
Yeah. So with each one of these, there is notes that explain. So everything that I shared with you verbally comes from that conversation, and it's all documented in an interview, as notes. I use a sheet of paper. I type it on a sheet of paper. That's how I do it. So that when I'm doing it for a client, I've got all my notes in front of me, and I can say, this is what they said. This is how they describe this. So I can describe how we got to the numbers that we got to in detail. And I can walk through that with, in this case, the CFO. So in this case, when I did that, we had 20 participants in this program. When I did that with this client, she said to me, there were 3 of them. She said, I don't believe that. Go ask this person XYZ, go ask this person something else. So I went back to those people. I asked them the questions that she had asked me. I got answers. I went back to her and I said, this is what they said. And in all 3 cases, it did not cause her to want to alter the amounts. She accepted the amounts as they were.
So it's correct me if I got this wrong. You need to ask validation for individuals who are involved, right? You can't go to a person, a role in the organization who doesn't know what's going on and then get validation.
Right.
So
exactly.
You need to either interview or run through the numbers, something, or they have to be involved in the whole process.
Correct.
So it's very case by case, isn't it?
It is. You just said it so perfectly.
Yeah.
That's what I should have said. But yeah, we always give an option of who you can, it can either be the manager, HR person. Most times I'm talking with the HR person because they have some of the numbers that we're looking for. Or it can be a manager of a functional area if it had something to do with that functional area, CFO.
All right. Shall we move on, or would you like more questions?
Okay. I'm almost, I feel like I went through this. Now I'm already to the takeaways. So this is about what I have. I don't know how we went through this so quickly. What do I have here? Oh, I'm not going to show that. So I'm about to the end, Lynn.
Okay, so we
I
still
talked
have,
fast.
yes, wow, we have 20 minutes. So maybe what we can do is to, and share me what you think. We could actually get people to unmute and ask questions. Are you comfortable with that? Am I putting you on the spot?
Oh, I'm fine with that.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, okay,
Yeah.
okay. All right, so guys, shall we do that? If you have a question for Lisa, you can unmute yourself and ask away.
I'm reading through the comments here too.
Okay, so go ahead. Who's that?
It's Avni.
Hi, Avni. What's your
Hello,
question?
Lisa. Hi there. Lisa, I'm not so sure if you shared this earlier, but might have missed it. What are the most reliable tools that you recommend in the marketplace that would make it easier to measure ROI? Because basically, we are finding that only 56%, like 56% of people in Southeast Asia are not measuring ROI, which is a staggering percentage. So,
yeah. And to that point, those of you who know Brian Underhill from Coach Source, he's got some research that shows, the recent research that shows that 63% of organizations don't measure business results of coaching, but they want to. So even though we hear this, oh, they don't really want to, well, 63%. So if you've got, the 47% that don't, that's great. But more than the majority want to, but don't. They don't, but they want to. That's a better way to state that. So your question is reliable tools. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, basically because the reason that they don't want to, I'm expecting, is that it's difficult to measure it. It's actually quite difficult to measure it. So are there any kind of reputable tools in the marketplace?
Yeah, aside from ours, I don't know of any that measure the financial ROI. Aside from ours, I just don't know if there are any. If there are, I don't know what they are.
Okay, thank you for that, Lisa. Thanks, Avni. All right, next person. Who do we have on the line?
My name's Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Yes, you're just below Vancouver, which is great. Now, I have a question, and that is what your service. Okay, so your tools. What is the cost of your tools? What does it cover? What is it? Is it just specifically for if you have an individual coach, or is it corporate, or is it the whole package, or do you get? Just can you explain?
I think what I need to do is do a check here with Lynn to say what can I really say, because today's session is a kind of a give back, and I know I don't want to overstep my boundaries of what I'm able to say. So Lynn, I'll ask you.
We can. Well, I think a lot of people are curious. We could leave that to the end. Kevin, is that okay with you?
Absolutely. I just wanted to pass through this, and because it's so interesting, is that I thought, well, okay, well, what is it?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll come to that, Kevin. Thank you.
Yeah.
Somebody else.
Hi.
Hello.
Who do you have online?
Titus here. Hi, Lisa.
Oh, hi, Titus.
Hi. Do you have a question?
Hello? Yeah.
Yes, we hear you.
So I'm curious about why do we have to convert it into a monetary number versus say some other measure that is more correlated or more related to the outcome that they want, say like a larger team, a better teamwork and things like that, using those measures rather than ROI, because perhaps maybe the conversion leads to a little bit more correlation versus that being the actual cause from what we did to the impact and the outcome.
Yeah, you don't have to. It's your choice. of how you want to do it, so you don't have to. The value of doing it is that it will help you stand out. It's a differentiator in the marketplace. It does build in accountability. While behavior change is great, one of the things that we find in our research is that not all behavior change actually leads to financial outcomes. For some, that doesn't matter. So there's always, individual differences, and you certainly don't have to measure the financial ROI. It's your choice, and it is a differentiator. I have a client, I mentioned earlier, we did a webinar this morning. We had one of my clients I've worked with for 4 years. They do a lot of work here in the Seattle area. They're great reputation. And she was able to point to 5 projects, and they sell large leadership programs. She was able to point to 5 projects they sold last year alone because they had the tangible evidence that they could use in the sales process. So it makes it easier for your prospective clients in a crowded market, or when the economy is tight and people are questioning what should they invest in. It makes it easier for your prospective clients to understand, if I give you my money, aside from behavior change, what are we getting back? Or aside from feeling good about this experience, what else are we getting back? Some won't care, and some will care. Some will say, that's great to know. You really distinguish yourself by the fact that you have it. I didn't think it was important, but now that I see what you can do, to me, you seem more advanced. So different ways to think about it.
Lisa, I've taken your slides off so that people can look at your face as you're sharing.
Okay.
Is that okay?
What happened?
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes. All right. Who else? Who has a question for Lisa?
Hi, my name is Joyce.
Hi, Joyce.
Yes, I'm curious about the work that you do with the United Nations. Is there any philanthropic project or initiative wherein you came in to help measure any social return on investment for projects?
Good question. So I did a project for a nonprofit foundation here in this area where I measured the impact of it. We did not end up looking at the social impact. We looked at the organizational impact instead of the social impact, because that was what was important to them. So that work is through ICF, the foundation, the Ignite program that ICF offers, and I've been a big part of that measurement process. Our measurement process in that program is fairly low intensity, so there's not a lot of rigor around that measurement process. It's how we wanted to get started. I know there's been some conversation around measuring social impact, but I just don't know what has materialized around that yet.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question though.
Yes, it is. We have a very interesting question, and I'm going to invite Anne up. So her question, actually, Anne, are you there? Do you want to unmute and ask?
Yes, hi. So I was looking at, because we've been always trying to prove the ROI based on like financial savings, revenue achievements, kind of like what are the positive stuff. But what about like the negative things, like if coaching is not implemented by the company? So like the disharmony, the lack of productivity, and
Right.
and the what would be lost if coaching didn't happen? What's your view on that, Lisa?
Yeah. Oh, good question. I think you'd have to have some evidence that you could point to that that's potentially what could have happened if coaching wasn't brought in. Because you're talking about avoiding some kind of potential problem or some kind of risk, and without grounding it into something, I think it would be hard to have that be recognized by decision makers unless they came up with it. If they arrived at those numbers, then that might be easier if they came up with those numbers. But otherwise, I think it could be challenging. I'm just saying that because I'm thinking out loud. If you gave me a while to think about it longer, I might have a different answer. But that's why off the top head.
Maybe just chiming in, because sometimes we can use like a projection and trend analysis. So if let's say the revenue
Right.
is kind of like hitting on a downward trend,
Mm.
so at which point the coaching comes in and how that's being arrested, and also maybe like employee feedback, like 360 feedback on a particular manager or leader, and then like and we can look at the the number of the percentage of attrition or unhappiness.
Yeah, absolutely. But in terms of avoiding something you don't know, I mean, for something that's improving, you can track things like trend lines. But in terms of looking at avoiding something, then that gets a little bit trickier. Yeah. Good. Though.
Thank you.
Great question. Yeah, great
And
question.
all right, next person. Who's got a question?
Hi there, this is Harry.
Harry.
Hi Lisa, thank you so much for your presentation. I've just got a simple question, and it's what are the common pitfalls or mistakes that you see being made or we should be aware of when we're measuring ROI?
Yeah, a couple things. I think one is when coaches are trying to find the financial values, one of the pitfalls is trying too hard to find the financial values. Whenever I teach the money talk, I always teach, you really want to relax and you want to make it okay. You want to take all the pressure off of the coachee. So a mistake that sometimes coaches make, is they'll go into that money talk determined to find the money. And what I always recommend instead is setting up, and the phrase I always say is, start with a debrief of what have you gained from coaching? What's different about you today than 6 months ago or 9 months ago? What do you think is different? And listen to that and reflect back and kind of dig into that, and then say, well, that's interesting. Can you give me an example of that, what you just described? And you listen for the example. And then as you're listening, then you might hear something that will have a financial value to it. And then you might say something like, it sounds like we could maybe even put a financial value on that. Now, let's see if we can do that. It's okay if we can't. We're not trying to force something that doesn't exist. And surprisingly, I bet we might be able to find it. Could we just kind of see if it's there? So we take the pressure off of them. We give them the opportunity to decline on finding the financial value. We're not pressuring them. And actually, we're more likely to find it when we do that. That's kind of one area that I notice is one of the pitfalls. And I had another one in my mind when you asked that question, but now I can't think of what it was. But that's the main one. That's the big one.
I'll buy you some time. I'll buy you some time, Lisa. So, in the new competencies, there's a lot of emphasis on partnering. And I think just what Lisa, according to what Lisa just said, or writing off what Lisa just said, I think that's where the partnering comes in, to not go in and kind of force this on people, but to say, maybe this is something we can explore and involve the coachee in also coming up with that.
Yeah. Oh, I know the other one. I just thought of it. Thank you for that. The other place where sometimes I see it happening is that not connecting what has changed in the coachee to the financial impact. So looking at a financial impact that has improved, but not connecting it to the work that was done in coaching. So revenue is higher, but not being able to pinpoint what has changed about the people that led to the improved revenue. So there's a disconnect, and that makes it unbelievable. The clients won't believe the numbers if you don't have the illustration or the examples to back it up.
Great, thank you so much.
Good question, Harry. We have maybe we have time for one more question, and then let's wrap up.
Okay.
Last question, guys. Okay, Carmen has a question. She kind of knew. She wants to ask you if you can call out any common theme or specific type of questions that the sponsors ask you. And is it challenging?
Common questions. Usually the most common thing they want to know is how we get to the financial values, how we validate the financial values. That's the usual kinds of questions. Keep in mind, by the time people get to me, it's because they want the ROI. So it's not me going to them and convincing them of it. They've already come to me and they want it. So they're already interested in it. They're already attracted to it. And it's more they are interested in the mechanics and especially around the financial values.
Okay, I have one last question from a chat earlier on, and I think it's a good way to wrap up. And that is, how would new coaches use this? How can new coaches start? And I think in this sense, new coaches, either coaches being they just started their coaching journey, or they've never used ROI before and they want to try.
Yeah, great question. The best way to get started is to use that money talk and just play around and practice with it. Take the pressure off of the coachee, take the pressure off of yourself, experiment. So there's no expectation you've got to find it, and nobody has any expectation that you're going to be looking for it. And so that way you get to experiment and practice, get more comfortable, make mistakes, not be able to find it. Practice with a friend, go back and try again. And once you build some confidence around that, then it does get easier.
So just to give everybody a sense, how long did you take to arrive at where you are right now?
A long time. Let's see, come on. Oh, I don't even know. It took me a while to come up with the Money Talk framework, actually. But I came up with that framework because I had to find the financial values, and I sometimes struggled to find it. And so somehow I came up with that framework in how to say it. I know why, because I had to teach people how to do it, because people were asking me, how do I do it? Because I was doing it kind of intuitively, and I needed to teach people, and that's how we came up with it.
Okay. All right, over to you to wrap up, Lisa.
All right. I have, let's see, what do I have? I have to share a slide. I rely on my slides so much. I'm going to say a couple things. First of all, if you go to, this is the automated thing that I mentioned, the automated ROI system, and you can email me. But here's one thing I want to say about this is when you go there, if you have made your pop-ups available, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. Okay. It looks like I'm frozen. You should just go to this URL and just wait for a little pop-up to come up, and it will ask you to enter your email address. And when you do that, it will give you access to the Money Talk conversation guide, which is more robust than what I shared with you today. And so that's how you can gain that. I did do a series of spring webinars, and it looks like, it's my computer that's completely frozen. I did do a series of spring webinars as my give back for the COVID season, and I did 8 ROI webinars. I started March 25th. The last one is May 13th. And if you want to see them, they're all posted in my Facebook community, and it's My Excelia Community. Just ask to join, and you can join that community, and all those webinars are in there. So if you want more on ROI, there's 7 recordings sitting in there now.
Wow, lots of resources there. Thank you, Lisa.
Okay. My screen is completely frozen.
It is, and your video is off as well.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, it's black.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay, I'm just going to stop your video for a while, and then you can see whether... Okay, guys, so the URL is pasted in chat, www.myexcelia.com. So she also has a Facebook page that she mentioned, and you can go there to get her resources. So use the same name.
Yeah.
How are you doing, Lisa? Anything else?
I'm doing great. We can't make eye contact or anything. I'm doing great. And yeah, you've all been fantastic. You've asked such great questions. I'm so amazed and impressed with the caliber of coaches here today, and I know that because of the questions that you asked. You asked some tough questions, and also I'm so impressed with the ICF Singapore chapter. They have put together an amazing program, and I know they invested a lot of time and a lot of thought, and it was put together flawlessly. They did a fabulous job, and so I'm grateful for them and also honored to be here with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for your work with ICF. So everybody, can we give her an emoticon, clap, or thumbs up for the fantastic session? And yeah, Lisa, you can take a look at all that. And there's still a lot of things going on in chat, a lot of thanks, and people sharing their sentiments. So feel free to hang around and watch that roll. I'm going to move. Okay. Thank you so much, Lisa.
And I'm going to leave.
Okay. Have a good evening. Thank you for spending
all right, thank
your
you.
night.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, guys. Oh, no. Let me see. Are you guys still seeing Lisa's screen?
We are.
Oh.
No screen.
Yeah, Lisa's screen's still there.
It's there but frozen.
Yeah.
That's okay. Then oh, she's gone now. Yeah.
Lisa frozen, everyone.
Oh, there. Okay. Okay. So I have some additional good news, guys. Please hang around. I know it's still showing Lisa's screen, but let's move on for time. So again, we want to just kick off with a thanks to Emergenetics and to put your attention on an email that will come next week post ICW that will have instructions to access your gift pack that has your own Emergenetics profile report and resources on their portal and their mobile app. There will also be a webinar that you can join. There you go. Okay. And also, again, thank you to the coachingapp.com, Starting Point, and the Coach Partnership for your support in the webinar series. So here's the good news. Later on in the afternoon, we are going to have a very exciting panel where we have business leaders, or we have leaders representing both the private and the public sector. We also have a marketing guru, and it's moderated by a coach and a trainer himself. So the topic that we'll be discussing there is what companies want in coaches. And because today is Vesak Day, thank you for joining us on a public holiday. The act of generosity here that we're inviting from ourselves and all of you is to invite a coach friend to log on the afternoon session and join us for free. And all you need to do is to pass them the Zoom registration link that we're going to paste for you in chat. Thank you, Adrian. Adrian's already pasted it in. So that's happening later today at 1:30 p.m. Mindfulness starts at 1. So you can pass the link on. Now, the other thing is on Friday, we will have an ICW closing celebration. And there's so much that we achieved this week. And I think it's a great time to just connect without slides, to connect and just celebrate the closing together. And the invitation here is to wear ICF colors. So it's either blue or yellow or gold. Bring a drink. It could be alcohol or not. And it's happening 8 p.m. right after the MCC panel on Friday. So everybody's welcome. Okay, after this, we're going to go into action learning breakout. I think there's a lot of things to discuss there. And you can please, you see the QR code there. You can click, take a photo of that, or the link has already been pasted in chat by Adrian. Adrian, do you have the link for CCEU? So please do that within 24 hours. Okay. All right, guys, I think we're all ready for breakout rooms. If you want to drop off, thank you for joining us this morning. We hope to see you at the next few sessions. And if you're staying on,
you want a photo?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Well, Lisa's gone. Yeah. Link to CCEU, please paste in chat. Thank you, Adrian. Okay, let's break them out. Thank you, guys. Feel free to drop off after your breakout room. See you guys later.
All right, everyone. I will be sending you into your breakout rooms right now. Have fun.